Inside our Speech and Language Kids curriculum, we have complete therapy packets for 84 different speech, language, and communication goals. And this week, I am adding a data probe to each and every one. Find out why I'm tweaking all of these goal packets and how the new system will work on today's podcast episode. Welcome to the Speech and Language Kids podcast. I am your host, Carrie Clark, speech language pathologist and the creator of the SLK Curriculum, which is a structured approach, a structured program for teaching communication skills to children and teens. So it is January 2026 as I am recording this, and I have been channeling all of my new year energy into some very exciting new things. But that means we have a lot going on at Speech and Language Kids right now. We have our caseload makeover / takeover that's happening right now. So I have 3 coaching clients that I'm running through the caseload makeover. And while I'm doing that, I also have taken over another SLP's caseload. So that's my caseload takeover. And through all of that, we are coming up with the best systems and strategies to help streamline and simplify caseloads. So that's all going to be trickling down to you guys on the podcast as well as we start moving through that. So that's happening this month. I am also doing daily podcasts focusing on the different aspects of supporting neurodiverse children and teens. So you'll get a new podcast every weekday. Hopefully we can keep up with that the whole month. We also have a new neurodiverse and thriving scorecard. So this is a quick 16-question quiz that you can take about a child or teen that you are working with, and it will give you an idea of which areas they are doing well in and which ones they could use a little more support. So you can find that at slkscorecard.com. So that's happening. And then we also have these new goal packets inside the SLK curriculum. So if you are new to me or not familiar with my curriculum, I have been creating materials for years and years at this point. And over the years, I have started to develop this into more of a structured approach than just a material library. Because what I've seen is that we don't just need more materials. There's plenty of those online. What we need is pathways. We need how do we put this all together in a way that makes sense and helps children and teens move from start to finish as quickly and efficiently as possible, helping them make up those gaps and really master the communication skills that they need to thrive in whatever settings that they are in. And so all of these various resources that I had created over the years have been starting to morph and grow into this full curriculum. And right before Christmas break, I finished the goal packets. And so this is taking all of these things that I've learned. This is the culmination of everything I've learned and created over the last however many tens of years this has been now, 20 years? I don't know how long it's been. And taking all of this and putting this into these really nice streamlined packets. So basically we have 84 different goals that we're covering in speech, language, communication, all of the different areas they're in. And for each goal, we have put together a packet, and the packet includes the sample goal. It includes your present level for your IEP or your therapy plan. It includes it didn't yet, but it's going to include a data probe for collecting data on that. And then it has all of the materials you need and the activities you need to teach the skills required to meet that goal. And so it's really putting this all together. We're not just saying, okay, here's an activity I can do, here's an activity I can do, piecing it together. We're putting them together in a cohesive plan that leads to real results and functional outcomes. And so all of those goal packets are now available inside the SLK curriculum. But this week, I'm focusing on this piece that I didn't have in there before that I think is really needed. And so the piece that I'm looking at is these data probes. So I mentioned earlier the caseload takeover. You may have listened to my previous podcast episode where I talked about this. But basically, I am helping out this month and next, and maybe the next, we'll see how long, at a rural school located close to me that unexpectedly lost one of their SLPs. And so they needed somebody to kind of come in and fill in some gaps. And I agreed to do that for my good friend, Laura. And so I am coming in. I came in last week for the first time. I'm coming in with fresh eyes. These are kids that I don't know, that I've never seen before. Yes, I have their goals in front of me, but not necessarily sure where we stand on any of those goals. Some of them they had all just come back from Christmas break, winter break. And so there's some regression that happened. So maybe even the notes that I had on where they were before break may have not been accurate. So I found myself needing a quick way to evaluate where each of these students stand on their various goals. And as I was looking through their goals, I can very easily match the goals that they had to one of our therapy packets. But evaluating where they were and collecting that data was a bit of a challenge, especially since I didn't know them. So as I was going through this week, I started thinking about how I could create data probes that would go along with the goal packets, and how that would work. So here's what I'm doing this week. I made my first one on Friday, and then I let it kind of simmer over the weekend so that I could see how I felt about it. But the way I want to do this is have a page inside each of these packets right at the front where you can grab the data probe, and then there will be a data page. And so the data probe will be different depending on what the goal is, but it'll be a quick way that you can evaluate how they're doing on that skill. So for example, I started on the B sound because it was alphabetically first. So we're going to have a goal packet for the B sound, working on articulation B. And so the picture, or the data probe that I picked, is a picture, and it is a picture that goes along with a very short story I wrote that's packed with a bunch of words that have the letter B. So if you had a student who was just working at the single word level on the B sound, you could just point to some of those some of those objects in the picture and say, what's this? And have them tell you the word, and you could collect your data. If you are working with a student who is farther along, or maybe has a goal to use that skill in conversation, then you could tell them the story that goes along with that picture, and then have them retell the story to you, and then have them come up with their own story about those characters. And so this one, piece of paper that has the data probe is going to have everything you need to be able to just take a quick probe, see how they're doing on that skill, and get the data that goes along with that goal. And then the idea is that you do your therapy and then periodically check back with the data probe to see how they're making progress on that goal. I think one of the things that we get tripped up on sometimes as speech language pathologists is that we are taking data on exactly what we're doing in therapy each day, which is great. We need that. But we forget to look at the data on the bigger picture, right? So yes, we're working on B in isolation, and we have our data on that. And then we start to work on single words. So we have our data on B in words, right? But if we don't go back and say, okay, how are they doing in conversation? Are we making any forward progress on conversation? Then it's harder to see that progress at a glance. But if we have one data probe that we use consistently throughout the school year or throughout the IEP year or whatever our time period is, then we're able to look at the bigger picture and say, okay, are they making progress towards this goal? If they have a language goal for following 3-step directions, well, we're not going to work on 3-step directions right away. We're probably going to work on 1 or 2 and start building our way up. But if our data probe is to work on those 3, or to check those 3-step directions, we might see that progress as we're going along, even though we're just still on steps 1 and steps 2. And that gives us an idea of where we stand on the functional outcome that we want the student to achieve. All right. So I'm super excited. I think these are going to be really great. I'm excited to put these together. I do think I'm going to need to reword a few of my goals, because I had previously had some of these goals as goals that the classroom teacher would weigh in on, which I still want to have that as an option. But I think if we're talking data probe, it needs to be something that you can do in your session to get a good view of how they're doing. So we're going to kind of tweak some of the wording on some of these, put together pictures or prompts or social scenarios or whatever is the most appropriate way to collect that data. And then all of that will be included right there in the goal packet. So here's how the goal packets are designed to work and how it will work once we get the data probes in. But like I said, the goal packets are already in there. They just don't all have the data probes yet. But if you are listening to this in the future, they might by the time you get to this. But here's how it works. So you will, if you have a subscription to the SLK curriculum, you will log in and you will see all of our 84 goals. Now, 84 sounds like a lot, but these are all grouped by categories. So we have them grouped first into the main categories of speech, language, functional communication, social communication, fluency, and voice and resonance. And so you go into the specific area that they need help in, and then you can go into sub areas. So if you choose language, there are 3 different following directions goals: a beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And so these can span over multiple years or multiple grade levels depending on what the individual you're working with needs to work on. So if you have a young child, you're probably going to start with the beginner goal. If you're working with high schoolers, you're probably going to start at the advanced level. And so you pick the goal that you need to work on, or match it up with what you're already working on and find the goal that matches. And then you can use the data probe to get the baseline data for that goal and set the threshold. Okay, so you say, okay, I know we want to work on, let's say, word attack strategies, being able to, we have a goal that says, when given a new curriculum word, they will use at least 2 different strategies to examine the word and to explain the meaning. Okay, so this is our word learning, how we're learning new vocab words. So you pick that goal and you say, okay, we're going to run the data probe to get our baseline data, and you see how well they do when you just give them a new curriculum word. Do they use any strategies, or do they just say, I don't know? And so you're using that data probe to figure out how many strategies they're able to use right now. And then from there, you can set the goal, right? So you can say, okay, well, he was able to use 1 strategy to take a guess at the word, but he wasn't able to use multiple strategies. So then you say, okay, by the end of the year, I'd like him to be able to use 3 different strategies, and that's where you set the goal. So that's the first data probe. Then you're just going to print the packet of therapy activities that are right there in that packet. You're just going to print those off and drop them in their speech folder. Then you get to do those therapy activities to help them learn the skills they need to make progress on the larger goal. Okay, so you can do the therapy activities in order that they are in the packet. You can pick the ones you like the most, however that works for you. But the idea is that you keep working on one activity or one specific skill until they mastered it. So for example, one of the activities in that packet about the word learning is looking at root words and prefixes and suffixes. So you're going to keep working on prefixes and suffixes until they have mastered it. And then you can move on to the next one, which there's one on looking at antonyms and synonyms, words that mean the same thing and different things. Okay, so then you work on that for a while. And then as you're doing these practice and you're working through these activities, once per month, you're going back and repeating the data probe so that you can look and see how they're making progress on the overall goal. Because guess what? Once they've mastered that goal, you're done with that packet. Even if you didn't teach all the specific different skills and activities that are in there, they've mastered the goal. That was what we wanted. We wanted them to be able to use those multiple strategies to figure out a new word. Now they've got that. They're doing really well. We can work on a different goal. All right. Now, if you are working on one of these activities, and like I said, you need to keep doing that activity over and over again until they master it. If you're doing that and they start to get bored with the examples that are on the specific pages for the teaching from the teaching materials, then that's where we have our AI-powered material generators where you can pop in and use a little AI bot that will generate more practice materials for you. So you could generate a picture or a word list or a social scenario, and you can use those to customize it to the actual interests of each of your clients. All right. So you pick the goal, you do the baseline or the data probe for baseline data, then you work on the activities, and once a month, you're repeating that data probe until they've mastered it, and then you move on. All right. So that's the simplest version of how that how that works, and we have all those packets in there already. So the other question I get a lot at this point is, how many goal packets do you work on, right? So for our speech language pathologists, our speech language pathology assistants working with a speech language pathologist, if you're doing speech therapy, we recommend that you choose up to 3 goals per year. So you can choose 3 goals from the same area. So you could have 3 different language goals. Or you can say, okay, well, they qualified in speech and language and fluency, so we're going to do 1 of each. You can also do fewer than 3, especially if they are the kind of client who needs extra practice and extra time to really master something. But up to 3 seems to be a pretty good fit for most clients. And then the idea is that you're only working on 1 goal at a time, so you're not working on all 3 of those, but that provides you, having 3 goals to work on provides you with enough to work on for the whole year. because you're going to work on one for a while and then you're either going to be done with that one and move on, or maybe you rotate through kind of like a cycles approach. But you can just print off all 3 goal packets right when you're doing your IEP, planning your IEP or your therapy for the year. And then you have your whole year worth of therapy stuck in their folder, and you just pull out the one you're working on at that time. Okay, so that's what we recommend for speech therapy. Now for our parents, our caregivers, teachers, educators, other professionals, we recommend you just work on one goal at a time. So you're usually not going to be making a year-long plan for this child. You're probably just trying to support them with what they're struggling with right now. So in that case, you would just choose one goal, download that packet, and work through it until either you feel like they've mastered it, or you decide we're getting frustrated with this, or we've plateaued and we want to switch to something else, and then come back to that. So that's kind of the way that we recommend you structure it. So that is my job this week, is to start working on these data probes. I have no idea how long it's going to take to get that done, but I do have my team to help me. So hopefully we'll have those for you guys very soon. But if you would like to check out those goal packets, you can grab a subscription to the SLK Curriculum. You just go to hub.speechandlanguagekids.com. There's a 7-day free trial, so you can pop in, grab some packets, see what you think. And then we have all kinds of other resources in there as well. But start with the goal packets, and then we can show you some of those other resources and other supports that you can access inside as well. If you have any questions, of course, let me know. You can email me at carrie@speechandlanguagekids.com, or leave a comment wherever you're listening to this podcast. Or, of course, just hop on into the subscription and message me inside there. All right. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoy our data probes that we're putting together. And we'll see you next time on the Speech and Language Kids podcast. Bye for now.